Father's Day. I am going to be doing some coverage on Father's Day later today. Oh, why is this so? Hold on, maybe it needs to be clean. I know it's horrible with the sun behind me, I guess, but why does it look so icky today? I feel like it looks dirtier than normal. But anyway, I wanted to share with you about we're going to do some videos on Illinois campaign finance, which I know it might sound kind of nerdy, but one of my goals is to educate everybody so that you know, even if you do not run yourself, you should know what you would need to do if you wanted to run for office. But that is going to drive me crazy. What the heck? Any better? Not the best. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, well, you're not going to be really watching me that much anyway. So let me pull up those videos. And yeah, hope everybody's doing well today. We're going to go to www.elections.illinois.gov. Then we're going to go to campaign disclosure. And actually, I might as well show you guys this website too so you can see. Oop, I just realized I think I still have this open and I do not need that open. Let's close that. Okay, can you guys, hopefully everybody can see that now. Voila. Okay, so this is the Illinois State Board of Elections website, elections.ill.gov. Then we're going to go down to, let me make sure I get the right info. Here we go. Campaign disclosure tutorials. So let's start with who is covered by the act. Actually, we don't even necessarily need to watch on YouTube, but I want to just expand it, make it a little bit bigger. Oh, actually, maybe I could just zoom in. That might be big enough. Let's see.
Welcome to the Illinois State Board of Elections Division of Campaign Disclosure tutorial on who is covered by the Act. In this lesson, we will cover the conditions that, if met, will require your committee to register with the Board of Elections, along with some best practices for new committees. To begin, a few conditions that, if met, will require you to register with the Board of Elections. The first condition applies to the acceptance of contributions in excess of $5,000 for political purposes within any 12-month period. This includes monetary contributions that are received from individuals, businesses, associations, labor organizations, and political committees. This also includes in-kind contributions, loans, and personal funds that are spent by an officer or a candidate on behalf of the committee. An in-kind contribution is a gift of goods or services. The second condition is when expenditures in excess of $5,000 are made for political purposes within a 12-month period. These can include, but are not limited to, expenditures for signs, printing, literature, campaign or committee websites, or other direct operational expenses. The last condition that can require the formation of a political committee is when independent expenditures in excess of $5,000 are made within a 12-month period. Simply put, independent expenditures are electioneering communications or express advocacy to support or oppose a public official, a candidate, or a question of public policy, provided that the spending is not made in coordination in any way with any of these entities, their committees, or their campaigns. Note that these conditions are separate when calculating your status in relation to the registration thresholds. The contributions, expenditures, and independent expenditures do not get added together. Once any of the $5,000 thresholds have been crossed, you must register with the Board of Elections by filing a Statement of Organization, Form D1, within 10 business days of crossing the threshold. Special note, committees created in the 30 days before an election must file a Form D1 within 2 business days of crossing the threshold. Now that you have learned about the conditions that require you to register, let's look at a few best practices necessary to keep your new committee running like a well.
If you have not heard of a D1, that is the disclosure that Illinois requires you to file if you are if you're starting some sort of political action committee or a campaign to fundraise for political campaigns. That's my understanding.
These best practices and record keeping. One of the first decisions a new committee will need to make is who will serve as the committee's officers. The 2 officers for a registered committee are the chair and treasurer. Per campaign disclosure law, both positions should be filled at all times, as financial transactions cannot be conducted if there is a vacancy in either position. In most cases, the same person, including the candidate, may serve as both the chair and treasurer of a committee. However, judicial candidates cannot be an officer of a committee according to the Code of Judicial Conduct. The committee chair may play a large role within the internal structure of your committee. From a disclosure standpoint, the chair will be the individual tasked with providing general oversight to the committee and will act in accordance with the treasurer to conduct committee business. The committee treasurer will be the main point of contact with the Board of Elections and is responsible for signing reports, ensuring all reports are filed and maintaining all committee financial records. The committee's financial records must be kept for a period of 2 years, with the exception of records pertaining to raffles, which must be kept for 3 years. It's highly recommended that the committee's treasurer have the necessary time and commitment to perform their required duties, and it's also important they be computer literate if the committee files its reports electronically. Moving on from committee officers, another decision a new committee must make is where to hold their funds. Campaign disclosure laws state the committee funds must not be commingled with any other funds, and as such, a separate account should be created to hold only committee funds. Individual rules regarding opening political committee accounts tend to vary between different financial institutions, so it's important to reach out to the financial institutions to learn their protocols. If a tax identification number is required for your institution, you can contact the Internal Revenue Service for assistance at 800-829-4933. It's recommended the committee consider having multiple trusted individuals be signatories on the accounts to prevent any situation where access is lost to the accounts. Now that the committee has set up a bank account, the committee should also set up internal record-keeping procedures. Complete and accurate record-keeping procedures are vital not only to a new committee to help determine the committee's creation date and creation amount, but also to all committees as they continue their operations within the state. These procedures should ensure that your committee has all the information that is required for filing all quarterly financial reports, including the full names and addresses of contributors and vendors where funds are received and expended. Additionally, the committee will be required to obtain employer and occupation information for individual contributors that give in excess of $500 in aggregate for a quarter. Remember, these financial records should be maintained for a period of 2 years and all raffle information for 3 years. Finally, good record-keeping procedures will assist your committee in steering clear of prohibited contributions. Campaign disclosure laws prohibit any anonymous contributions, contributions made in the name of another entity, contributions on state property unless rented or leased, and fundraisers by legislative committees or constitutional officers in their committees on days the legislature is in session. Good record keeping will help keep these prohibited contributions at bay. Keep in mind there are also contribution limits to be aware of. Those are discussed in another tutorial. To review, we have covered the different registration thresholds that require a group to register with the Board of Elections, along with some best practices to consider when selecting the committee's officers, setting up bank accounts, and creating record-keeping procedures. For more information, please see our additional campaign disclosure.
All right, so we got that. Let's see, what is the next one here? So who is covered by the Act? The next one is D1, Statement of Organization. Oh, okay, good. So they actually talk about that.
Welcome to the Illinois State Board of Elections Division of Campaign Disclosure tutorial. On the statement, this lesson, we will learn how to both complete and file a statement of organization, also known as a Form D1. To review, any group that accepts contributions or makes expenditures or independent expenditures for political purposes in excess of $5,000 within a 12-month period must register as a committee with the State Board of Elections. Additionally, any group wishing to establish a political party committee must register once the political party is created, as this committee type does not have a $5,000 threshold. Therefore, this type of committee must report from penny one. If any of these conditions are met, then your group must register with the Board of Elections by filing a D1. For more information regarding the registration thresholds, please see our tutorial on who is covered by the Act. The Statement of Organization can be found by going to the State Board of Elections website, elections.il.gov. Once there, you'll notice a series of tabs across the top of the screen. Choose the tab second from the left that reads Campaign Disclosure. From there, in the middle section of the Campaign Disclosure options is the Forms section, and the Statement of Organization Form D1 will be the first one listed. The Statement of Organization will pull up as a fillable PDF. We now have the form. Let's learn how to fill it out. The first section of the D1 is the header section. In this section, you will find a place to put the full name and current mailing address of the committee. It's important to ensure the address chosen for the committee is one that is checked often because all official committee mailings will be sent to that address. In addition, you will find a small checkbox for changing the address of an existing committee, as well as a checkbox to indicate you want to receive report notifications via email only. If you choose that option, please remember to include a valid email address in the space provided. The political committee identification number is something that's assigned by the board once you file the D1. So if you're creating a new committee, just ignore that box. If you are amending a D1 for an existing committee, you can enter your ID number if you know it, but it's not essential. Moving on from the header section, Section 1 is where your committee will indicate what action it is trying to accomplish with this form. If you're registering a new committee, check the box for new committee. If making an amendment to an existing committee, check amendment. And finally, if reactivating a previously finalized committee, check their reactivating box. If making an amendment after this being amended. However, if you're registering a new committee or reactivating an old committee, you'll want to fill out the entirety of the D1 to give us all the current information regarding your group. Sections 2 and 3 are a little more challenging, and this is where errors are most likely to occur. These sections are where you will indicate your committee's creation date and creation amount. The creation date is the date your committee crossed the $5,000 threshold, or the date the committee voluntarily decided to file the D1 early. The committee's creation amount is the fund balance the committee had available as of the creation date. These two pieces of information can be a little confusing, so let's go over a few examples together. Example 1. In this example, your group has gone out and raised $5,000 in contributions and is therefore right at the threshold. Then another contribution for $500 is deposited, taking your committee across the threshold. Your committee must now file a D1. In this example, the creation date would be the date the committee received the $500 contribution, taking it over the threshold, and the creation amount would be $5,000 because that's the amount the committee had available prior to crossing the threshold. The $500 contribution would be the first transaction chronologically to be disclosed on its quarterly report. Example 2. In this example, the committee has raised and deposited $5,000 in contributions and has spent $600 on printing, leaving the committee with a balance of $4,400. Then a $500 contribution is received and deposited, taking the committee over their receipt threshold. In this example, the committee's creation date would be the date the committee deposited the $500 contribution that took it over the threshold. The creation amount would be $4,400 because that's what the committee had available as of the date the committee crossed the threshold. Like in example 1, the $500 contribution that took the committee over the threshold would be reported on the committee's first quarterly report. Example 3. In this example, the committee decides to put some money into the committee to get it started by depositing $6,000 in a single transaction. That deposit is in excess of the $5,000 threshold, thus taking it over the threshold. In this case, the committee's creation date is the date the committee deposited the $6,000, and the committee's creation amount would be $0. In this example, the $6,000 would be the first transaction reported on a quarterly report, and due to the amount, would also require an A1 report to be filed. We'll get more into the A1 reports in a later tutorial. In the final example, the group has raised less than $5,000 but has decided to register prior to crossing the threshold. In this case, the creation date would be the date the committee files the statement of organization, and the creation amount would be whatever amount the committee had at the time they were filing early. Special note, if your committee decides to register before crossing the threshold amount becomes irrelevant, and the committee will be required to disclose all activity going forward from its date of creation, even if it never exceeds the $5,000 threshold. Please keep in mind that whatever creation date you list on your committee's D1 statement of organization will be the starting date for the committee's reporting obligations. So receipt and expenditure information will have to be reported from that date forward, and the first quarterly report your committee has to file will be based on that creation date. With a better understanding of the committee's creation date and amount, let's continue filling out the D1. The next section is where your group will indicate your committee designation. There are 5 such designations in the state of Illinois. They are candidate political committees, political action committees, political party committees, ballot initiative committees, and independent expenditure committees. There is also a 6th type called a limited activity committee, which can only be created from an existing candidate committee. So we'll skip that for now. As you can see, each committee designation is unique. A candidate political committee is, as the name implies, a committee set up by a single candidate. Only candidate committees can contain the name of the candidate within the name of the committee. The committee can support an individual for more than one office, but if the multiple offices being sought are elected during different election cycles, then the candidate must designate the current election cycle to be used for the committee. Additionally, candidates cannot have multiple committees set up to support themselves for the same office. If the candidate sets up multiple committees, one for each different office, then the name of each committee must include the name of the candidate along with the office being sought. Political action committees, on the other hand, may be established by any person or group other than a candidate or party to support or oppose a candidate or candidates. The name of the political action committee must include the name of the group or individuals responsible for its formation, unless the committee is to support multiple candidates, in which case it must contain the jurisdiction the candidates are running in and the offices that are being sought. Additionally, a candidate cannot form both a candidate committee and a political action committee to support their own candidacy. A particular person or group can only establish one political action committee at any given time, unless the other committee is an independent expenditure committee. The third committee type is a political party committee. A political party committee may be formed by a new political party or the state or county central committee of a party, a legislative caucus committee, or by the ward or township committeemen of a political party. The name of a party committee must include the name of the political party that forms it. Each state, county, ward, or township group can only create one political party committee. The next committee designation is a ballot initiative committee. This is a committee formed by a person or group to support or oppose a question of public policy to be placed on the ballot. The name of a ballot initiative committee has to include a brief description of the public policy question and whether the committee is supporting or opposing it. The last committee designation is for independent expenditure committees. An independent expenditure committee is a committee that is formed for the purpose of making independent expenditures in support of or in opposition to any public official, candidate, or question of public policy to be submitted to the voters. Independent expenditure committees include groups that make electioneering communications that are not coordinated with a public official, candidate, or their campaigns. Moving down the D1 form, Section 5 is where your committee will designate the area.
So I know that was a lot, but you can see the different committees. So we hear about a lot of this, right? Like on, oops, wait, is it? No, it's on full screen. Sorry. You might hear about that. The candidate political committee. Like I've seen, I think Christopher Clark had one when he was running for mayor. I think Napoleon had one when he was running for Senate. Napoleon Harris. A PAC, Political Action Committee. I know that says supports or opposes candidate or candidates. So that, to me, that seems like it's more broad or broader type of group. Political Party Committee, a new party, a state or county central committee, legislative caucus. I know I've heard of like the Black caucus, let's say, or the Latino caucus. Maybe that's what that's for. And Ward Township Committee. So I guess that would be like what? The Thornton Township Democratic Committee or the Thornton Township Republican Committee, maybe? Ballot initiative, that's pretty straightforward. Like when you want to support, voting for something that's going to be on the ballot. Like let's say you're supporting voting for a tax increase for schools, or you support voting against a tax increase for schools. I don't know, something like that. This one's still kind of vague to me. Independent Expenditure Committee, it just says no coordination, express advocacy. I don't exactly understand what that is. Yeah.
Candidate or their campaigns. Moving down the D1 forms, Section 5 is where your committee will designate the area it will primarily operate in, along with any party affiliation and sponsoring entity, if applicable. A sponsoring entity is any person, group, organization, corporation, or association other than a political committee that contributes at least 33% of the total funding of a political committee. Next, Section 6 is where the committee will declare a general or specific purpose for the committee being established. An example of a committee's purpose might be to support candidate A for the Illinois House of Representatives. Moving on, Section 7 is where your committee will list any candidate or candidates it's established to support or oppose, along with the office or offices being sought. Please be sure to include complete and accurate information for each candidate. Section 8 of the Statement of Organization is among the most important. In this section, the committee will designate who will serve as officers of the committee. The same individual, including the candidate, may serve as both committee chair and treasurer, except for judicial candidates who cannot be an officer of a committee. Both the chair and treasurer positions must be filled in order to conduct financial transactions. Furthermore, accurate current contact information, including the address, phone number, and email address.
But I believe they covered already where they said that the treasurer and the chair can be the same person.
Address of both officers is critical, as the committee officers will serve as the main points of contact with the state board. For more information on officers, please see our tutorial on who is covered by the Act. Sections 9 through 11 are the last ones on the Statement of Organization. Section 9 is where your committee will designate the name of any person other than a committee officer who will handle the committee's financials, such as an accountant or campaign manager. A custodian is not required, so if you don't have one, just leave this section blank. Section 10 of the Statement of Organization is where your committee will list the name and contact information for the financial institution acting as a repository for committee funds. Some institutions will not allow a political committee to open an account without a D1 being on file. If this is the case, indicate the information of the financial institution the committee plans to use, even if the account has not been opened yet. An amendment to the D1 can always be filed should any of this information change at a later date. Finally, Section 11 is where the committee will designate what they plan to do with residual funds in the event that the committee decides to close. The committee may choose to either return the contributions to its contributors, not to exceed the amount of the original contributions, transfer the funds to another political committee or committees, or transfer the funds to charity. Once the Statement of Organization form has been completed, it will need to be signed. There are 3 separate lines to sign depending on the committee's designation. The top signature line is for the signature of the committee chair for ballot initiative committees only. The middle signature line is only for the signature of the committee chair for independent expenditure committees. The bottom signature line is for all committees. It requires the signature of either the treasurer or candidate of the committee. Ballot initiative committee and independent expenditure committees will need the committee treasurer's signature here, in addition to the chair's signature above. Now that you have learned how to complete a D1, let's quickly look at how to make an amendment to an existing committee. You'll need the same D1 form as referenced in this tutorial. Make sure to have your committee's name and address in the top header and amendment marked in Section 1. From there, you will only need to fill out the information that's changing from the original D1. For example, if your committee was making an amendment to change the committee treasurer, you would only need to fill out the treasurer information in Section 8. Once you have your committee's name and address, amendment marked in section 1, and any other changing information filled out, simply sign and file the amended statement of organization. Please remember, it's very important to keep your committee's information on file with the State Board of Elections up to date. The information provided on your D1 is what we will use to contact you about problems with a report, reporting deadline reminders, penalties, and appeal information, and important changes to the law. If your D1 information is not current, you may miss a critical mailing. The statement of organization may be filed either by hand delivering or mailing it to either the Springfield or Chicago offices, by fax or by email at d1@elections.il.gov. Congratulations, you have now learned how to complete and file a D1. Once registered, your committee will now have to periodically file disclosure reports, including but not limited to A1 reports of $1,000 or more and quarterly reports. For more information, please see our other
All right. So we made it through 2. So we talked about basically who's covered by this act, about if you want to have, committees to fundraise for politics, for campaigns. And then they told us how to fill out the D1, which is your form that you file with Illinois, with the state, to register your committee. So, and remember, why are we doing this? Because I want you and me and everybody to understand what you need to do to run for office, even if you don't end up running, which I hope you do run for something, but everybody should know what is required. Also, we can help keep politicians accountable too, right? That's important. Schedule A1 reports. Okay. This I remember about the D1, but not the A1.
Welcome to the Illinois State Board of Elections Division of Campaign Disclosure tutorial on A1 reports. In this lesson, you will learn what an A1 report is, when to file an A1, and lastly, how to file an A1 report. To begin, A1 reports are a required disclosure report that gives both the public and the Board of Elections prompt notice that a large contribution has been received by a committee. Specifically, an A1 report is required to disclose any receipt of $1,000 or more in a single transaction from any single source, including cash receipts, checks, loans, in-kinds, and funds from a candidate to their own committee. A1 reports are required year-round and must be filed within time-specific windows, which we will cover in a moment. There are penalties for any late or non-filed A1 reports. Now that we know what contributions require an A1 report, let's learn about when an A1 report needs to be filed. As previously stated...
Okay, wait, sorry, hold on. I just want to review that again. So, a receipt of $1,000 or more in a single transaction. Okay, so if you have a donor for your campaign or your committee, giving $1,000 or more dollars in a single transaction, cash, checks, loans, out of pocket, in kinds. Oh, okay. In kinds, I think that means like if someone wants to donate, let's say something that's worth $1,000, right? I believe that's what that means. Like maybe food or something that's worth more than $1,000. Has to be filed year round. Okay.
Reports. An A1 report. Let's learn about when an A1 report needs to be filed. As previously stated,
so that's like pretty much right away, 5 business days when you receive it. So to my understanding, then if someone gives me, let's say I'm running for something and they say, here's $1,000 worth of food, you got to report that to Illinois within 5 business days or you can be in trouble. Oh, and then 30 days prior to an election, 2 business days. So they want it reported more quickly in that like month before an election. Interesting. Now, what qualifies for date of receipt? I see here they have It's cash, the date received, deposited, check, date of deposit, in kind, date notified, received.
A1 reports must be filed within time-specific windows, depending on how close to an election an A1 contribution is received. Normally, an A1 report must be filed within 5 business days after the date of receipt of the contribution. This 5-day window shrinks to 2 business days if the contribution is received within 30 days prior to an election in which your committee is participating. To calculate your required A1 filing window, first you will need to know the date the receipt was received. A contribution is considered received on the date a committee deposits it in a bank, financial institution, or other repository of funds. Therefore, the date of receipt is not necessarily the date the committee is given the contribution. Similarly, the date of receipts for in-kind contributions may also vary. The date of receipt for an in-kind is generally the date the committee is notified or becomes aware an in-kind has taken place, and or the date the committee actually received the in-kind goods or services. Once the date of receipt has been established, an A1 must be filed within either the 5 or 2 business day window, depending on whether the contribution is received within 30 days before an election. Initially, a committee may choose to file an A1 report either electronically or on paper. Once a committee's activity adds to $10,000 in combined activity during a single quarter, the committee will no longer be allowed to file on paper and will be required to file all reports electronically. To file electronically, the committee will need to first set up an electronic filing account with the Board of Elections by calling either their Springfield or Chicago office. If the committee chooses to file on paper, the A1 report may be found by going...
that again. It sounds like you can make all these reports for your campaign committees or your political committees electronically. You have the choice. Either you can file the reports electronically or via mail. But once you get above $10,000, then you have to use the electronic form. But why would you want to do it by mail? I would think you'd always want to do it electronically. That's so much easier.
Going to our website, elections.il.gov, under the Campaign Disclosure tab, and clicking on the Schedule A1 form. Once you have the form, place the committee's name and address at the top of it. Next, in the boxes provided below, enter the name and address of the contributor, along with the date and the amount of the contribution. Once you have entered the contributions on the A1 report, have either the treasurer or candidate sign and date the form. If another individual is filing the report on behalf of the treasurer or candidate above, place the name and address of that individual on the bottom section of the form. Now that the paper A1 report is completed, email, fax, or drop off the A1 to either the Springfield or Chicago office of the board. Attention, campaign disclosure. A1 reports may also be created and filed electronically using the IDIS-3 system. For more information on filing A1 reports electronically, refer to the IDIS-3 help menu or our IDIS-3 manual on the homepage of the Board of Elections, elections.il.gov, located in the Publications section under the Campaign Disclosure tab. 2 final reminders. Any contributions reported on an A1 will also have to be included on a committee's quarterly report. And remember that penalties may be assessed for a late or missing A1 filing, so it's important to be alert for contributions of $1,000 or more received by your committee. To review, in this lesson we covered what contributions require an A1 report, when to file an A1 report, and methods of filing an A1 report. For more information, see...
All right, so we talked about A1s. Now, quarterly reports, D2s. So these are required by the states. And again, if you don't do these things, you get heavy penalties. I believe, I didn't look it up myself, but for instance, I was told that that's what kept Keith Price running for some positions, because he had not, he owed some money to the State Board of Elections. So I do know that these are very important things to know.
Welcome to the Illinois State Board of Elections Division of Campaign Disclosure tutorial on quarterly reports, Form D. In this lesson, we will cover the basic filing requirements associated with reporting a committee's financial activity on a quarterly report. This information includes the receipt and expenditure types, date of receipt, itemization thresholds and prohibitions, along with quarterly filing dates, methods for filing, and finally, how to complete a D2. Let's begin with receipts. Receipts can be categorized into 5 different types: individual contributions, transfers in, loans received, other receipts, and in-kind contributions. Individual contributions are receipts received from an individual person, business, organization, or association. For contributions received from businesses, organizations, and associations, the contribution must originate from a general revenue fund to be an individual contribution. The next receipt type are transfers in. Transfers in are contributions from another political committee. Anytime you hear the word transfer, you should immediately think of committee-to-committee activity. So in the case of transfers in, another committee has given your committee a contribution. The third type of receipt is loans received. Loans received include both institutional and personal loans. The terms and conditions of any loan need to be in writing. Loans received will be reflected on both a Schedule A as a loan received and a Schedule C for debts and obligations. The fourth type of receipt is classified as other receipts. Other receipts should be used to bring funds into the committee that are not direct contributions. Common examples of other receipts are interest or dividends, voided checks, security deposits, or other situations where funds are returned to the committee. The final type of receipt is an in-kind contribution. In-kind contributions include anything of value other than cash donated to a political committee. In-kinds can be either goods or services received and should be reported at fair market value.
Okay. So I was right before. I thought that that's what that was. So I'm assuming that would mean, like, if someone wants to say, here, we'll donate, normally we charge this amount of money to rent our hall, but we'll donate it to your campaign. So you have to report that. Or maybe they donate food, or if they say, here, we'll give you some accounting services for free, then you have to report that.
In addition to the receipt types, it is equally important to understand the date the contribution was received. Depending on the situation, the date of receipt from a disclosure standpoint may change. Generally speaking, the date of receipt boils down to the date the funds were available for use by the committee. As such, cash contributions are deemed as received once the committee either deposits the cash, or if not deposited, the date the committee received the cash. Contributions received via checks, on the other hand, are considered to be received on the date the committee deposits or cashes the check, and are not necessarily the date the committee is given the check. A little more complicated than either cash or checks are in-kind contributions. The deemed receipt date for in-kind contributions is the date the committee obtains knowledge of the in-kind contribution, but only if the committee didn't actually obtain possession of the goods or services. If the committee does receive the actual goods or services, the contribution is considered made on the date the recipient receives the goods or the date the services are actually performed. Contributors of in-kinds are required to notify the recipients of the contributions. In most cases, a committee receiving an in-kind should report it as received on the date the committee receives notification of it from the contributor, rather than the date listed on that notification. Now that we know both the type and date of receipts, let's take a look at the itemization thresholds. When filing a quarterly report, the committee will be disclosing all of the funds received within the given quarter, but the amount of information required for each receipt will differ depending on the amount of the contribution. All receipts that are $150 or less in aggregate from any source may be reported as non-itemized. When reporting non-itemized receipts, you can add all the receipts of $150 or less in aggregate together and report them all in one lump sum. Receipts of more than $150, though, need to be itemized. Itemized receipts will require the name, address, date, and amount of the contribution to be reported on a Schedule A, except that itemized in-kind contributions are reported on a Schedule I. Anytime an individual gives a committee more than $500, their employer and occupation will also need to be provided. When looking at whether or not a receipt needs to be itemized, it's important to remember that a committee must have records for all contributions received. Keeping good records will ensure that you have all the information required for the quarterly report. Keep in mind there are some prohibitions on receipts. Committees are not allowed to accept anonymous contributions, contributions made in the name of another person, or allowed to solicit or accept contributions on state property unless rented or leased. Finally, legislative committees or committees for executive branch officers cannot hold fundraisers on days the legislature is in session. With better understanding of receipts, let's now look at what you will need to know about expenditures for the quarterly report. Like receipts, there are different types of expenditures. The first type is a transfer out. Just like on the receipt side, whenever the word transfer is heard, you should immediately think of committee-to-committee activity. As a result, the classification of transfer out should be used to disclose funds that your committee has contributed to another political committee. The next type of expenditures, loans made. Loans made are rare. The loans made must be in furtherance of the committee's activity and should have a written agreement between the committee and the entity receiving the loan. Loans made will be reflected on a quarterly report, both in the expenditure section under loans made, as well as on an investment schedule until the loan is repaid or forgiven. There are regular expenditures. This is for expenses such as rent, office equipment, printing, and signs. If the committee is spending funds to further its operations, then more than likely it will be classified as an expenditure. The last type of expenditure, independent expenditures. Independent expenditures are those made for the purpose of creating electioneering communications or express advocacy in support or opposition to a candidate or question of public policy that are not made in any coordination or consultation with another entity. Independent expenditures do not include activity for your own committee and should not be confused with regular expenditures.
Yeah, that one's still a little unclear to me. Independent expenditures, electioneering communications, express advocacy, no coordination.
Regular expenditures. Just like receipts, expenditures have the same $150 itemization threshold. Expenditure should have a clear purpose, and when you report reimbursements, you should report the ultimate vendor rather than the individual who is being reimbursed. All expenditures of $150 or less in aggregate to any source can be reported as non-itemized by lumping the small expenditures together and reporting as one amount. Expenditures in excess of $150 need to be itemized. Itemized expenditures will require the name and address of the vendor, along with the date, amount, and purpose of the expenditure. Also, similar to receipts, there are prohibitions on expenditures. A list of prohibitions on expenditures may be found in the Campaign Disclosure Act at 10 ILCS 5/9-8.10. Next up, when to file a quarterly report. As the name indicates, a quarterly report, Form D2, discloses all the activity that took place within a given quarter of the year. The 4 quarters are January 1st to March 31st, April 1st to June 30th, July 1st to September 30th, and finally October 1st to December 31st. The filing period for a quarterly report will begin the day after the close of a quarter and will continue until the 15th following the close of a quarter, unless that falls on a weekend or a holiday, in which case it will end on the next business day. There are two different methods to file a quarterly report. The first way is to file electronically. Any committee which at any time during any reporting period has a balance of $10,000 or more, or reaches $10,000 or more in receipts or expenditures, must file campaign disclosure reports electronically. Once a committee has crossed the threshold requiring it to file electronically, it must continue to do so until the committee dissolves, even if it drops below the threshold. To file electronically, all committees, regardless of what system is used, the IDIS system or an outside vendor, will need to call the Board of Elections to set up an electronic filing account. Setting up an account only takes a few minutes. The State Board can only provide support for the IDIS system. Once an account has been set up with the Board of Elections, you can access the IDIS-3 login page at idis3.elections.il.gov or click on the IDIS-3 link on our homepage. Once logged into the IDIS system, you will need to enter all the receipts and expenditures for the quarter. For detailed instructions on how to enter transactions into IDIS, follow the IDIS-3 help menu or reference the IDIS-3 manual, both of which have step-by-step instructions, including pictures of the icons. Once all transactions have been entered, follow the steps to file a report, sending it to the Board of Elections. Faxing or emailing a paper report does not count as an electronic filing. The second method of filing a quarterly report is to file on paper using a form called a D2 and the appropriate schedules. Printable forms are available at elections.il.gov under the Campaign Disclosure tab. Let's now look at how to prepare a quarterly report on paper. Starting with the quarterly report cover page, Form D2, you will first want to indicate whether the report is a quarterly, final, or amendment, and what quarter the report is covering. For a quarterly filing, check one of the four corresponding quarters to indicate which quarter the D2 is covering. For a final report, check the box marked final, as it will indicate to the board that the information contained in this D2 is the last financial disclosure of the committee and that the committee's balance has been zeroed out. If a committee is making an amendment to a previously filed quarterly report, you'll need to check not only amendment, but also one of the four corresponding quarter boxes to indicate which quarter is being amended. Place the committee's name and address at the top of the report. If the committee's address has changed, place a check mark in the provided box. If the committee would like to receive email notifications or change the email address on file for notifications, mark the provided box and place the email address you want to use in the provided space. Then enter the quarterly period date and the amount the committee had at the beginning of that period. The beginning amount should be the same amount reported at the close of the previous reporting period. Or if the D2 is your first quarterly report, the amount of funds available indicated on your D1. In this example, the quarterly report covers January 1st through March 31st, and the committee has started the quarter with $1,000. Next, Section A will be where you input all of your receipt totals. Let's look at an example. In this example, amounts have been entered to reflect the total amounts for each category of receipts. All the receipts in this example total up to $4,500, which is reflected in the receipts total line in Section A. Furthermore, in this example, we have stated that the committee received $500 in itemized in-kind contributions. In-kind contributions do not change the total receipts amount because in-kinds will have a monetary value but are not direct contributions of funds. All amounts that are reported on an itemized line 1A, 2A, 3A, and 4A should have a Schedule A to accompany them, and the amount reflected on line 5A should have a Schedule I to itemize its activity. Similar to Section A, Section B is where you will input all of your expenditure totals. For example, the committee's total expenses have been broken down into totals for each expenditure category. Like in the receipts section, the total amount of all expenditure types will be reported in the total expenditure line in Section B. Additionally, all amounts reported on the itemized expenditure lines 6A, 7A, and 8A should have an accompanying Schedule B, And the amount reflected on line 9A for independent expenditures will need a Schedule B9. Section C of the D2 is for total outstanding committee debts and obligations. The lines in Section C should equal the amount reported on lines 3A and 3B in the receipt section, along with any other outstanding debts or obligations of the committee. Lastly, on the D2 cover page, Section D is for cash balance totals. Line A in the total section should reflect the same amount listed at the top of the form for beginning balance. Line B will reflect the total receipts line in Section A. And line C in the total section will reflect the totals of the two lines above. Line D of the total section reflects the same amount reported on the total expenditures line in the expenditure section. Line E will be an amount equal to lines C minus D and should equal the amount the committee has as of the close of the quarter. Additional schedule. If the committee did not, candidate of the committee must sign and date the quarterly report. Additionally, if another person other than the committee's officers or candidate submits the report, then place the name and address of the individual submitting the report on the lines on the lower left. As previously mentioned, all amounts reported on itemized lines need to have an accompanying schedule to report the itemized transactions. All itemized...
Oh, sorry. The doggy hears something outside.
Receipts will be reported on a Schedule A and Schedule I. To fill out a Schedule A, place your committee's name, committee ID, and reporting period at the top of the form. Next, check the receipt type you are reporting on this schedule. Depending on committee activity, multiple Schedule A's may be required. Finally, on the lines below, you will report the names, addresses, dates, amounts, and possibly employer and occupation information for contributions requiring itemization. The total on each Schedule A should reflect the same amounts listed on the itemized receipts lines on the D2 cover page. Schedule I should be used to report all itemized in-kind contributions received. To fill out a Schedule I, place your committee's name, committee ID, and reporting period at the top of the form. Next, in the space provided, list the name and address of the contributor who gave the itemized in-kind, the deemed receipt date, and the amount. In addition to the deemed received date, the committee must also report the date the in-kind contribution was originally made. You can put that information in the description box. Along with the aforementioned information, the committee will need to report the name and address of the vendor and a brief description of the in-kind. Again, the description should contain not only a brief description of the in-kind, but also the date it was originally given. The total on the bottom of the Schedule I should reflect the same amount as reported on line 5A for itemized in-kind contributions. Itemized expenditures are handled in the same way, only they are reported on Schedules B and B9. To fill out a Schedule B, place your committee's name, committee ID, and reporting period at the top of the form. Next, check the expenditure type you are reporting on this schedule. Depending on committee activity, multiple Schedule Bs may be required. On the lines below, report the name and address of the vendor along with the date and amount. The total of each Schedule B should reflect the same amounts listed on the itemized expenditure lines of the D2. Along with the Schedule B, if a committee makes independent expenditures in excess of $150, a Schedule B9 is required. A B9 is only needed for independent expenditures and should not be used to disclose regular operating expenses. To fill out a B9, place your committee name, committee ID, and reporting period at the top of the form. In the space provided, place the name and address of the vendor to which the expenditure was made for the independent expenditure. Then place the date, amount, and purpose of the independent expenditure. Next, check the box to indicate whether the independent expenditure is supporting or opposing a candidate, the candidate's name, and the office and district of the candidate. Finally, a B9 must be signed and dated by either the committee treasurer or candidate. Schedule C should be used to disclose all outstanding committee debts and obligations, as well as loan repayments. To fill out a Schedule C, place your committee name, committee ID, and reporting period at the top of the form. Next, list all outstanding itemized debts and obligations, including the name of the entity that gave the loan, date, amount, any repayments on the debt, and the outstanding balance of the debt as of the close of the reporting period. Schedules A, I, B, and C are the most commonly used forms for reporting committee activity, but other forms may be required depending on the nature of a committee's activity. To file a paper D2, fill out the D2 cover page along with any and all schedules required based on your committee's activity. A D2 may be filed in either the Springfield or Chicago offices by mailing, hand delivering, faxing, or emailing, as long as your committee is not required to file electronically. If your committee chooses to send your D2 in the mail, please note that the D2 must be postmarked at least 3 days in advance of the last day to file to be considered timely filed if it is received after the deadline. To review, in this lesson, we have covered all the information required to file a D2.
All right. You're hanging in there, guys. Whew. I don't know why they make this so complex, these election laws. Again, that's why I'm sharing this, because I feel like there's a whole sorry, I'm just gonna go sit on the floor with the dog because he wants attention. He gets antsy and upset if I ignore him for too long, which I understand. Hi, baby. Oh, okay. Let's not shake off and get stuff on my computer screen though. Good boy. Better says hello. It's almost like I always say there's like a political class, the class of politicians and their donors, and they want this to be really complicated and they don't want us to understand so that we don't participate. And I do not agree with that, obviously. So, hey, Wyoming, thank you. Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to share this because I need to learn this myself. And I thought, let me share this with everybody because that is one of my goals, is to educate about how elections work. So please feel free to watch the replay. And then Wyoming says, whoever comes in, hit the like button. Thank you, Wyoming gal. I appreciate that. Definitely like, share, follow. If you want to donate, all my information is at the bottom. All the money, the proceeds just goes towards, helping Harvey, helping the Southland, trying to get local news out there and, getting people to get active in their government, right? It's your government. Okay. So that was quarterly reports. They're called D2s. Now we go to election cycles and contribution limits.
Welcome to the Illinois State Board of Elections Division of Campaign Disclosure tutorial on election cycles and contribution limits. In this lesson, we will cover the election cycles for the various political committee designations, along with the maximum amounts that can be received from any source before contribution limits are met. Election cycles. Simply stated, an election cycle is the time frame in which a committee fundraises. The election cycle of a committee will vary both by the selected designation of the committee and, if a candidate committee, what office is being sought. Let's begin with the election cycles for candidate political committees, in which the candidate is seeking an office elected in the general election. Candidate committees established to support or oppose a candidate seeking an office elected at the general election will have two election cycles, the general primary and the general election cycles. The general primary cycle will begin January 1st following the last general election and will continue until ending on the date of the next general primary in which a candidate seeks nomination for that office. The general election cycle will pick up right after the primary cycle, and as such will begin the day after the general primary. The general election cycle will continue until ending on December 31st, following the general election for that office. Next, for candidate committees established to support candidates for offices elected in the consolidated election, there are still two cycles, the consolidated primary and consolidated election cycle. The consolidated primary cycle will begin July 1st following the last consolidated election and will continue until ending on the day of the next consolidated primary in which the candidate seeks nomination. The consolidated election cycle will immediately follow, starting the day after the consolidated primary and continuing until ending on June 30th following the consolidated election. Moving on, the election cycles for candidates for the General Assembly are similar to candidates elected in the general election with one small difference. The election cycle for a General Assembly candidate resets at the next legislative election, regardless of whether the candidate's term is up. As such, the general primary cycle begins January 1st following the general election and continues until the date of the next general primary. Following immediately after, the general election cycle begins the day after the general primary and continues until ending on December 31st following the general election. Similarly, the election cycles for candidates for judicial retention mostly follow the election cycles for candidates elected in the general election. The only difference is the general primary cycle begins January 1st, following the general election in which the candidate was elected, and ends on the day the candidate files the declaration or intent to seek retention. Immediately following, the general election cycle for judicial retention candidates begins the day after the candidate files declaration or intent to seek retention, and ends on December 31st following the general election for retention. Special note, candidates that hold or seek more than one office elected in different election cycles must declare one cycle to be used for campaign disclosure purposes. This declaration is indicated on the D1 form. As you can see, election cycles for candidate committees are more complex as they are dependent upon the office being sought. Luckily, the election cycles or other committee designations are much simpler. The election cycles for political party committees, political action committees, ballot initiative committees, and independent expenditure committees follow the calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, resetting each calendar year. Now that we know the timeframes of committee election cycles, let's look at contribution limits. Contribution limits are adjusted in odd years based on the rate of inflation. The following limits are effective as of January 1st, 2023. Starting with candidate political committees, a candidate committee can receive $6,900 from an individual, $13,700 from a business or organization general fund, and $68,500 from another candidate or political action committee. Additionally, there is no limit on contributions to a candidate committee from a political party committee, except for election cycles in which a candidate seeks nomination at a primary election. The amount a candidate committee can receive from a political party committee depends on the office being sought. During the primary cycle, candidates for statewide office can receive up to $274,200 from a party committee. Candidates for the Illinois Senate, Supreme, or Appellate Court in Cook County or countywide office in Cook County can receive $171,500 from a political party committee. Candidates for Illinois House, Supreme, or Appellate Court outside Cook County, countywide offices outside Cook County, and local candidates within Cook County can receive up to $102,900. And finally, all other candidates can receive $68,500 from a party committee during the primary cycle. Once the election cycle resets, the committee is allowed to receive the maximum contributions from each source again, and if in the general or consolidated election cycle, there is again no limit from a political party committee. There are two additional limits that only apply to candidates seeking nomination to Supreme Court, Appellate Court, or Circuit Court. Candidates seeking nomination for these positions may not accept contributions from out-of-state contributors or from any entity that does not disclose the identities of those who make contributions to that entity. There is an exception for labor organizations and similar groups or their political action committees acting as a conduit to facilitate the delivery of contributions made through dues or levies. Those contributions do not have to be itemized, except for single contributors who give more than $1,000 in a quarterly reporting period. The contribution limits for the remaining committee designations are similar. Political action committees can receive $13,700 from an individual, $27,400 from a business or organization general fund, and $68,500 from another political action or candidate committee. The contribution limits reset each calendar year. To continue, political party committees can receive $13,700 from an individual, $27,400 from a business or organization general fund, and $68,500 from political action committees. There are no limits from other political party committees, candidate committees, and the party committee's federal counterparts. But there is no transfer of funds permitted between legislative caucus committees. Again, the contribution limits reset each calendar year. Finally,
wait a minute. I love how arbitrary some of these things sound too. Look. So if you have a political party committee, okay, so these limits like they have for the other kinds of committees, yeah, but if you're getting money from another political party committee or a candidate committee, there's no limit? Political party committee or a federal party committee, there's no limit. We need better ethics laws. No transfers permitted between legislative caucus committees. Why don't we just do publicly financed elections? This is all BS anyway. I feel like the connected politicians know how to get around these limits anyway, which is sad, but
the contribution limits reset each calendar year. Finally, ballot initiative and independent expenditure committees do not have any contribution limits. These two designations have no contribution limits because there are restrictions on the kind of political activity in which each committee designation can participate. Ballot initiative committees cannot give any direct contributions to other committees and must use their funds exclusively to support or oppose a question of public policy on the ballot. Likewise, independent expenditure committees cannot give direct contributions to any other committees, but rather must use their funds for independent expenditures in support of or in opposition to candidates or questions of public policy. Additionally, independent expenditures made by the independent expenditure committees cannot be made in any consultation or coordination with any other committee or candidate. To review, we have now covered the different election cycles and contribution limits for each committee designation, noting election cycles vary depending on the committee designation and if a candidate committee, the office being sought. For more information, see our additional tutorials and publications.
Okay, I think that is about it for today. Let me see. We watched who's covered by the Act. D1. D1s, that's what you file when you start your political committee. A1 reports, I believe those are the ones for if you have large contributors or large contributions. Quarterly reports, those are filed every quarter. They call those D2s. And then we just watched election cycles and contribution limits, which, like I said, it seems very arbitrary, kind of weird. But let's see. They also have some website additional information. There's one called A Guide to Campaign Disclosure and several brochures found in that section of the website. They also say you can call the Campaign Disclosure Division. They give a Springfield and a Chicago number. Okay, let's go back. And I'll just show you guys again. All right, so this is Illinois State Board of Elections, elections.il.gov. If you go there. And then this is, gives a whole bunch of information. Oh, okay. So if you want to start a political committee, there's the D1. You use the D1. There's the D2 information. Enforcement talks about the penalties. Raffle forms. Oh, Lord. But yeah, isn't it? I think it's so unnecessarily complex. It's almost like they want to keep ordinary people from doing it. Right? Sounds like our tax code. I also have heard that the 2025 contribution limits were increased, which is crazy, as if the big politicians need more money, right? Okay, I see. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the videos we just watched. Committee treasurer training. What is that? Let's open that. Oh, okay. It basically just has a form that's saying that the treasurers need to watch those videos. Got it. Ooh, let's try this. It says candidate disclosure search. Let's start with, how about, we'll do our mayor here in Harvey, Christopher Clark. Okay. Election year, that was the last year, okay, that he ran. So he has a committee under Christopher J. Clark. His address, the house that he doesn't live at, but he owns. Yeah, 2019, he ran for alderman. 2020, oh, sorry, for mayor the first time. 2023, he ran again. Let's see if it says anything. Created in 2018. The address was the building where he did have his law office, where, by the way, he did not pay the property taxes. I think it was owned in his mother's name, but they didn't pay the property taxes. And then he's going to go after other people, supposedly, for not paying their property taxes. It's crazy. Albert Warren Jr., there's an address given in Homewood, listed as treasurer. So let's see his latest D2, shall we? Let's take a look. Filed on May 12th electronically, covering January to, well, the first quarter of 2025. Okay. They did not report any under receipts. They didn't report anything. No in-kind contributions, expenditures. Let's see. Oh, wait, debts and obligations. They list $38.50. Funds available. Let's see. At the end, to start, about $47,000. At the end, about $45,000. So he's still got a decent amount of money there. Remember, a lot of that money came from the Speaker of the House, Chris Welch. Let's see what they reported spending the items on. Okay, let's see. Constant contact. Okay, that's for emails, I would assume. CubeSmart. So they've got some kind of storage facility in Harvey that they're reporting paying on. R2 Message and Media that they're paying on. So that looks like, ooh, that was a big research. Almost $1,200. That's where most of the money went. So I see, it sounds like for marketing, media, and a storage unit. and not itemized was $64.80. Now, let me look at this again, because didn't they say... Yeah, I thought it was, if it was under 150, you didn't have to itemize. Oh, but maybe that's what they mean by aggregate, because like the constant contact was only $91, but it was 1, 2, 3 times during that quarter. Maybe that's why. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. So I guess you can look up anybody on that, right? Is anybody on with me? Do you want to look okay. Yeah, if anybody wants me to look someone up, but otherwise that's about it for today. I'll be on later to talk about Father's Day. Let's see, who could we look up just for fun? How about Napoleon Harris? I mean, I definitely agree with the idea of being transparent, but that's why I wanted to share this, because like I said, I feel these laws are written to keep people out, so that there is a small class of people that are into politics and everybody else is sort of not welcome. Oh my goodness. No records? What? What do you mean nothing for Napoleon? Oh, never mind. I reversed the names. Haha, Harris. Napoleon. Okay. So it looks like the last election year was listed. Well, that's weird. He just ran for Thornton Township Supervisor. I wonder why it's saying 2022. But anyway, it lists an address in Flossmoor. You'll notice it does not list the address where supposedly he says he lives, where he does not live, in Harvey, by the way. Napoleon Harris, in case you forgot, he still does not live in Thornton Township. Nothing personal. I have nothing personal against him or anybody, but if we're going to have residency rules, shouldn't you obey them? I think it's just crazy. No, you better stop. No, get out of there. Okay. No. So this must have been his last election for Senate, I'm guessing. Then we have Friends of Napoleon Harris. State senator. Yep, he is a state senator. He's the chair of the committee at his Flossmoor address. Stop! Nicole Harris is treasurer. I'm guessing that's his wife? I'm not sure. Oh, wait, it says resign date in 2013. Oh, okay. So I'm guessing then maybe Napoleon's doing both. Hey, I was just on the floor with you. Stop. Sorry, this boy is a little high maintenance. Let's walk him outside for a minute. Okay, and let's look at his D2. So his latest quarterly D2. So he has contributions listed. Wow. $15,000. That's pretty significant. Look at that. Expenditures about 13, almost 14,000. Wow. And he is reporting about $330,000 in his fund. So, you see, this is how these people stay in power. All that money. Let's take a look at Napoleon Harris's individual contributions from the first quarter. Let's see here. Let's do show us all, please. Is this a law firm? Something Taft, Stetson and Hollister LLP, I'm assuming. $500, and they're based in Ohio. Okay, that's random. Pavilion of South Shore. Is that related to, hold on. I know I said I wouldn't take that much time, but hold on. Pavilion. Because remember, there was this huge scandal with Napoleon being involved. Okay, short-term and long-term care. It's a nursing home in Chicago. Oh, and it is for profit. It is for profit. Interesting. So they gave $1,000. Oh, I'm sorry. The scandal was that I think he's finally off that committee, but Napoleon was taking money from and was getting income from investing in insurance companies while he was regulating them at the same time. So that was just earlier this year. And I'll show you guys this too. Okay, hold on. Because we don't want rumor, right? We want to get to the facts. All right, can you guys see this now? Good, it's showing up. All right. So just so you can see why it's important that we ask questions and follow up on these things, please don't come up with an ad. Come on, get out of there. Thank you. This is from January of this year. State Senator Napoleon Harris out as chairman of committee regulating insurance industry. It follows a Sun-Times report in 2024 that the former NFL player took on an investor role with the Southwest Suburban Insurance Brokerage firm. Okay, so they reported that Napoleon Harris was an investor with insurance while being chairman of a committee regulating insurance. So you can see it's a problem, right? That's a huge conflict of interest. Oh, this is a telltale picture of Illinois corruption. Look, State Senator Napoleon Harris speaks in 2019. House Speaker Chris Welch on the left. Chris Welch is by far the biggest donor to Clark's campaign. And Governor J.B. Pritzker standing in the background. To be clear, I do not mind J.B. Pritzker fighting Trump and his corruption. That's great. My problem is let's get that same energy and enthusiasm, JB, for the corruption in Illinois and in Cook County. That's all. I'm not getting involved in people that just get involved in stupid things and calling him fat and whatever. No, don't care about that. All I want is consistency. We don't need to get involved in petty stuff. When the Sun-Times reported last year that State Senator Napoleon Harris had become an investor in a Southwest Suburban Insurance brokerage business while serving as a gatekeeper on legislation impacting the industry in Illinois, as head of his chamber's insurance committee, the Flossmoor Democrat insisted there was no conflict of interest. Notice, Flossmoor Democrat. Did they say Harvey Democrat? Did they say Harvey Democrat? Oh, by the way, I'll add these links so you guys can see. Lord, this reminds me. I mean, we could just do a whole day on this kind of stuff. And remember, it's nothing. I'm not personally against. Oops, that might not have come out. It was a little long. I'm not personally for or against Napoleon or any of these people. I just want to get the truth out. And remember, if we're going to have laws and rules that these people supported, they voted in, then I think it is extremely fair to say they need to follow those laws, right? Otherwise, why have them? Especially when you want to go after other people like Tiffany Henyard for not following the laws and being corrupt, but then you don't want to be held accountable yourself. That is a huge problem. All right, so Harris was quoted, "None of this bears any relationship to my work in Springfield. If you look at the results, it's clear the insurance committee has been about improving the industry for consumers." Now Harris is out as the chairman of that committee, but it's unclear whether the 2024 revelations about his insurance side venture played into the recent decision by State Senate President Don Harmon, an Oak Park Democrat, to transfer him out of that assignment for the new legislative session. Asked about this, Harmon spokesman John Patterson said, "With the start of every new General Assembly, there is a shuffling of responsibilities to best recognize senators' interest, experience, and expertise. The leadership and committee chair announcements for the blah, 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 blah reflect that." Okay, so basically they're just saying, nothing to see here. No, we're just shifting it around. And it just happens to be after the Sun-Times reported the huge conflict of interest between investing in Illinois insurance and regulating that same Illinois insurance. Oh, and they show a link to their first article. Senator Harris chairs insurance committee and invests in insurance brokers. How isn't that a conflict? I agree. Patterson portrayed Harris losing the post as part of a promotion, saying, "Oh, that's a great spin. Senator Napoleon Harris has moved into the position of assistant majority leader. Senator Harris has been a leader for his community, focusing on public safety and health." Public safety? Really? When we've asked Senator Harris for years to intervene in all the corruption and the weaponization of our police, not only do they not solve crimes or prevent crimes here, but they perpetrate the crimes. So how is he a leader in public safety and health? Wow. Harris, a former NFL linebacker, joined the General Assembly in 2013 and became Insurance Committee Chairman in 2019. Oh, so that was nothing new. Okay. And then they show the screenshot from, I think that's the conflict of interest form you have to fill out. Source of income, Harris Brothers Group LLC and the Max Group Plus. So you can see that was filled out. Oh, economic interest statement. Harris did not respond to calls or texts last week. Last June, the Sun-Times reported Harris began partnering with two men who run a Crestwood brokerage called the Max Group. Calling it a new business venture, Harris said, This was an opportunity to support a local business run by two area guys with longstanding impeccable credentials in the field. These are people I've known for years. They've helped me out with my own insurance needs well before I arrived in the Senate." I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you're also regulating insurance. I think that's a pretty clear issue, right? While overseeing the insurance committee, Harris accepted tens of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from the insurance industry. Come on, man. How is that not a conflict of interest? Including in November when he got $2,500 from a State Farm Political Action Committee and $2,000 from the parent company of United Healthcare, records show. Let's see. Oh, there's another article. Senator Harris's campaign spent $6,600 at high-end department stores, at least partly on clothes. Oh, jeez. Senator Julie Morrison took over as committee chairwoman. I don't agree with this. This is interesting. See, for those people who want to say the Republicans are the saviors, listen to this. State Senator Dave Syverson, a Rockford area Republican who served last year on both the Health and the Insurance committees, says citizen legislators often bring potential conflicts, but the key is being upfront about them, and Harris was. He told me at the very beginning what he was doing, adding that some of the bills voted on under Harris were things the insurance companies did not support or like. But is disclosure enough? Especially when, I'm sorry, but Napoleon has enough sources of income with his restaurants and everything else. Does he really need that more money to survive? He already is lying about living in Thornton Township and now he's township supervisor. Like, there's just too much shady stuff going on. And then this was in January. So it says Harris, who wants to unseat Dalton Mayor Tiffany Henyard in the upcoming election for Thornton Township Supervisor, has drawn criticism for using his campaign fund as what appears to be a personal piggy bank, spending thousands of dollars at high-end department stores, on luxury auto leases, and on a pizza parlor he ran in Harvey, among other questionable payments. Records show his campaign fund, Friends of Napoleon Paris, paid the Max Group $325 in August in what was described as insurance for picnic. The company's website, Max Group, says, "Our firm is committed to the highest degree of ethics, accountability, and professionalism. We will provide your company with tailored solutions to effectively manage risk from highly regarded insurance carriers at a competitive premium." Oh boy. So there's a lot here. Oh my goodness. I didn't even realize all this was going to come up. Well, we'll have to do a separate session just on Senator Harris. But I can't help but look. Oh, this was last year, 2024. Napoleon Harris's campaign spent $6,600 at high-end department stores: Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue. By the Flossmoor Democrat, again, it's not. Look, the press knows it and openly uses it. If he lives in Harvey, why is he listed as the Flossmoor Democrat? All right, let's see. The Flossmoor Democrat, again, they call him, and former NFL linebacker will not explain what was bought and why. Now, remember, this is from campaign funds, okay? So it's not that you can't spend campaign funds on different things, but, I think the criticism is that that's suspicious and excessive. It says the largest was in 2020, totaled about almost $2,300 at Neiman Marcus in Oak Brook. The expenditures were listed as clothing and supplies. In 2021, about $1,100 was spent at the same store, saying it was for clothes. I mean, that's not campaigning, buying luxury clothes. They also reported spending about $1,400 at Nordstrom in the Loop. No, that's not the Loop. That's River North on Grand or Gold Coast. That expenditure did not even list a purpose as required. Almost $1,000 at the Oak Brook Neiman Marcus again in May 2022. No explanation was given. Why is he not being held responsible for this? And they want to go after Tiffany for her stuff? I'm sorry, but this is not okay. $866 at Saks Fifth Avenue in Miami in 2021 for what was described as clothes for political event. Wow. Okay, so remember, that's all from his campaign funds. The following month, that was in 2021, Harris's campaign reported paying more than $1,700 for lodging at the Four Seasons Hotel Miami. That's about a mile from the Saks. Okay. So why would he need to use campaign funds to stay at a hotel in Miami? Illinois politicians' campaign funds generally are not supposed to be used on personal expenses. The rules specifically flag clothing as something that cannot be purchased with campaign money if it's for personal use. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Thank you sometimes. According to state election law, a political committee shall not make expenditures for clothing or personal laundry expenses, except clothing items rented by the public official or candidate for his or her own use exclusively for a specific campaign-related event, provided that committees may purchase costumes, novelty items, or other accessories worn primarily to advertise the candidacy. Costumes, novelty. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess like if if you're buying like T-shirts or something, or little tchotchkes to hand out, or that things that people can wear, hats maybe that advertise the campaign. But I didn't even know that. So it says in the state election law, it's only supposed to be covering clothing items rented for a campaign-related event. And I guess that would make sense, right? Like maybe if you wanted to rent a tuxedo or something. The same law also grants wide leeway to political figures on spending, saying nothing in this section prohibits the expenditures of funds of a political committee controlled by an officeholder or a candidate to defray the customary and reasonable expenses of an officeholder in connection with the performance of governmental and public service functions. I mean, I don't know. Is a suit, is high-end luxury clothing considered a reasonable expense to perform governmental and public service functions? I would rather our politicians just dress like normal people, and like actually do their job. Federal law could apply, though, if a political figure were to use campaign money on personal expenses and not pay income tax on that money. Oh boy. So better just not to. If you're going to buy a suit or luxury clothing, just don't use your campaign money, see? Harris would not answer questions. He said, I file publicly available campaign reports, which I showed you guys one of the sites where you can find that. Just showed you, right? That's this site. Oh, sorry. I'll go back to it in a second. I have to resubmit it. He says, if there are discrepancies that can be remedied, we'll address them in a timely fashion. Okay, but did he ever address them? State law allows campaign funds to pay for vehicle leases if vehicles are primarily used for political or governmental purposes and not as a family car. There are no restrictions on how much can be spent for those leases or the type of vehicle. Wow. I mean, I think that's way too generous. You can tell the politicians wrote these laws, right? Oh, there's another article. Oh my God, you guys. Yeah, I definitely have to cut this off. Senator Harris ordered to pay $23,000 in underpaid worker wages. Okay. Anyway, back to this article. 2020, the Harris campaign reported $14,000 for a lease payment for a Mercedes-Benz in Orland Park. Wow. Between 21 and 23, his campaign spent more than $5,000 at RZA Cadillac in Tinley Park. Last August, Harris's campaign funds spent nearly $2,000 at discount legislator since 2013, derives income from a company that runs a Beggar's Pizza franchise in Harvey. His campaign, so that's in my city, his campaign is reported paying the restaurant more than $50,000 over the years, records show. Really? That sounds suspicious. I mean, 50,000, that's a lot of pizza and or fees to rent a space. That's crazy. In February, Harris's campaign committee paid his Beggar's Pizza $6,000 for reading program vouchers. What the hell? Come on, guys. You cannot criticize Tiffany and not bring up this stuff. In 22, the political fund paid beggars $4,000 for rental space. It reported spending $7,500 more that year for rents, apparently for using space there for his campaign headquarters for a time. In 2021, the Harris campaign paid beggars $10,000 for meals for various programs and functions. That's a lot of pizza. Plus $10,000 for the Senator Harris reading program. What the hell? Why do you need to pay $10,000 to your own pizza restaurant? To me, see, that's stuff that looks like you're trying to take your campaign donations and use it for your business. An ALSIP company that provides food and supplies to restaurants was paid more than $100,000 by Harris's campaign since 2022. Well, like I said, at that point, aren't you just illegally using your campaign money for your business, to fund your business? Some of the expenditures were listed as being for supplies and food products, or just supplies. 3 of the 10 payments list no detail. Company officials didn't return calls. Harris's campaign fund. I'm sorry, you guys. It goes on. We're almost done. Harris's campaign fund paid a private elementary and middle school in Northwest Indiana more than $13,000 since 2017, with 8 of the 9 payments listed as donations. One for more than $5,000 in 2021 was described as contractual. Wait. Why is a campaign fund donating to a school? What does that have to do with running for a campaign? And the school is not even in Illinois. Is he paying tuition for his kids to go to school or something? Harris wouldn't say whether any of those payments cover tuition for his children. That's what I was just asking. Educational expenses, except for governmental or political purposes directly related to a candidate's or public official's duties and responsibilities. Yeah, paying for a private school in Indiana or donating to them, that doesn't make sense. Great job, Lynn Sweet. Oh boy, you guys. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Have a wonderful Father's Day, and we will talk some more later. I will schedule a show where we can talk about fathers, if anyone wants to come on and share about their impact from their father. And then see you guys later.